So in this video, I'm going to show how I replaced this over-the-counter microwave. Mine broke, or it would seem like it was working. It would turn on, the tray would spin, the magnetron would hum, but it wasn't heating anything. So I'm pretty sure it was the magnetron or the high voltage diode. I looked at the parts. It would take a couple days to get it. I don't know, it's gonna be like $100, and you can just replace these things for like $250 or something like that. So it really wasn't worth replacing, especially if it was like 12 years old or something like that. So I'll just show how to do it. It's usually easier with two people, just because you're kind of leaning over or to get the oven out of the way. But I did it by myself. It's really not that heavy. It's like 50 or 60 pounds. But it really I'll show you how it attaches on the back. That kind of hinges so it holds to the wall, and then there's two screws on the top. So it's really easy to get out if you have an existing one. If you don't, there's going to be a little bit of work to do that. And then the largest work really is the venting system, just because you have to have an existing vent if you don't want to just recirculate the air. Otherwise, you have to put one in there, and that would be a whole separate video. I actually selected the model that was the same brand, very similar, just so because I was hoping that the vent would be the same and everything would kind of be simple and simplify it. Again, and then mine is like built up. The vent's actually built up in here, and I didn't want to tear it all apart. So I'll show you how I did. So if you're replacing, I would just kind of get an idea of what you're looking at here. I'm just checking mine out, make sure it works, or functionality is there. And here's kind of just showing you what I was saying. There's a bracket that actually attaches to the wall, and the microwave sits on that. Those little hinges, I call them hinges, but they're little tabs that sit up there, and that's how it supports it. So you just want to kind of make sure that there's, it's as expected. I mentioned there's a couple screws on the top here. They should all pretty much look like this. Usually only like 2 screws or so. So just kind of get, again, an idea of what you're going to have to do. And you remove the oven if you're going to do it that way. Unplug it, of course, if you're touching anything like this. And then one other thing that I did, just because I can know, because I've had to clean this out several times, is I actually took the bottom off. There's several screws. You may not need to do this, but I did this because you'll see there's a lot of oil in there just from over the years of just like grease and everything getting up there. And I was worried that as I took it down and tipped it forward, I would get that grease everywhere all over myself. So I just took a little extra time here, took the bottom off. You can already see that oil, the orange everywhere in there. So I took this bottom plate off, cleaned it off, and then I put the plate back on there. But again, I just didn't want to make a mess. And actually, as after I took this out and sat it in my garage, it did actually leak everywhere. So I'm glad I cleaned this up before I took it out and put the new one in there, just so, again, I didn't make a mess. And so this is what it looked like, just because that oil just creeps up in there and just settles everywhere. You'll see it all over this paper towel. Again, you may not have to do this, but I just precautionary step just to avoid any little bit of mess. So I put that back in there and then started taking it off. So the screws out the top there, and you see I got a plastic crate, and I just put underneath it just to support it. That's what the screw looks like. They're pretty long. You'll see me taking this out. At least on mine, they were like 4 inches long. So again, I have that in there because as soon as you start releasing those screws, all that weight's just going to be on the hinge in the back, and it's going to tip forward. So I'm taking it off here, holding it with one hand, but also having that little bit of rest where I can put it down. I just want to get a sense of, make sure is it the weight that I was expecting. It's going to tip forward like this. There's nothing else obstructing it. I can see where the power cord is. I can pull that out. Just get it all set so when I take it down, I only have to lift it up slightly off those back tabs. So it seemed all okay. Again, if you're doing with 2 people, it's a lot easier. But I was just checking here. So like I said, you have to tip it forward just a little bit so that you can clear those tabs. But once you get it off, again, as expected, it wasn't that heavy. So I just got it, and it's sitting there. And then I just take a look at the bracket. I was hoping to be able to reuse the bracket because it's the same company. Here's those little tabs they stick on that allows it to hinge up. But it ended up being a different bracket. And then here's the way mine, that's where the hole goes for the power cord. That's the vent, and you can see mine kind of actually sticks down a little bit, so that's what I was hoping to replicate like that. Just have it seal up there instead of attaching and then having to do everything. Again, there's probably a mess up here. If there was a mess inside the oven and it's been there for many years, I would clean all this out while it's clear, and then take off any of that tape or anything, any other obstructions. And again, if you're redoing or putting a new old one up or new one up, you have an old one, you might have to take out the existing bracket. I was hoping mine was the same, like I mentioned, but it's a little bit different. But it's not that big of a deal. But just and be careful when you're working with any type of sheet metal like this, so you don't cut your fingers. So here's that new tab. It was just the one that sit on the bottom. It seemed a little bit less sturdy, but again, these things aren't very heavy. But so I would, again, you're working this inside the oven, anything, just be careful. And this is, so I went to go to look at mine, and this is what my new one looked like. It was bent in the box, and it was, it took a while to get it, and it was a bit of a drive, so I figured I could just, try to fix it instead of having to go replace it. These are mostly empty space and just kind of metal, sheet metal. So what I did was just plug it in temporarily just to make sure, it wasn't damaged. It turned on. I set the clock on it just because you have to do that, and then I just tried it real quickly. Seems like it's spinning. I could hear it humming, so it seems like it's okay. So I can try to work on this back and get it set. So there was a screw in there. Hopefully you won't have to do this. It would be a nice pristine shape. My box looked fine, but for some reason it's got, dented. It must have been dropped in the corner. So I just lightly used like a rubber hammer and some like a plastic, or the rubber side of it, the plastic, just to kind of square off all those corners, because I could see where it was bent and it kind of overlapped a little bit. So I just wanted, really what I wanted, that bracket where the tabs sit on it, I wanted that to sit flat. And it's hard to see, but it was still up a little bit on that corner. So I just make sure I got it square into 3 different angles. There was a part that was kind of buckled there, and that's where that screw came out. With a little bit of work, it wasn't too bad. I was able to get in there. It looked like it was sitting flat and flush, so it shouldn't be a problem once I mount it. I really wanted those tabs to make sure they were square, so it seemed like it was okay. Just a little bit of extra work. So the first thing you'll probably have is a template that you put on the back wall that just has a lot of information. And just look at the manual. Really, I just needed it to know where to put the bracket. And again, it'll tell you where they want you to put screws, at least one in a stud usually. You want to center it. I had already got mine centered here, and also marked where my studs, because the previous brackets had hit those, so I put that on the blue tape so I was able to see. I just want to double check the bracket, verify that the actual physical oven would fit in where I was expecting it to. And then you want to get your bracket on and have it level. Again, I marked where the studs were so I could pick where the hole. They give you a lot of options and usually tell you which holes they want you to put in. So mine, again, I was using one of those on the ends because they want some of that, and that's lined up with a bracket, so I just marked that off. The one all the way on the right was not hitting a stud, so I have to put in one of the toggle bolts over there, but I marked where they wanted that. And then luckily, then you pick something towards the middle, and mine was had an ability to hit a stud in one of those, so I think it seemed like it was pretty good. Again, it's only holding like 50 pounds or so it's not really that bad. But you really want to get this part accurate, get it level, get it all lined up. And then I used a Phillips screwdriver just to kind of punch where I wanted to, just so I would have a little bit of a visual aid once I pulled that template down in the drywall, because I could see the little plus sign from the Phillips head screwdriver. Here's it on the right. That's what I'm showing. I had to put a toggle bolt in because that's what they wanted if you couldn't hit a stud on one of the edges. So that was just the extra size hole. Just put in there. I think it was like 5/8 or something to clear that 1/2 inch. And then with the studs, they still wanted you to use, they gave you some bolts that were meant for wood, almost like lag screws, but they're not the hex side. They were Phillips head. So I got that in. So here's what it looked like. So they're a little bit thicker than normal. So this should be plenty to hold it. 2 of those into studs and that toggle bolt all the way on the right. It was plenty. So I just put in all the screws, and then I didn't tighten them down all the way because I still wanted to make sure it was level, because there's a little bit of play in there, but I wanted to clear everything off. So again, make sure it was level, and then tighten it down a little bit more, or most of the way, so there's just a little bit of place I can do a final adjustment, but enough here. Those toggle bolts are kind of a pain. But again, I got it lined up this way, and then I could see it was level. It's not moving, so I just tightened it by hand just because I didn't want to over tighten it, especially that toggle bolt, and destroy the drywall. And then next is a template usually on the top, so I'm not really using the vent. I measured it out, and I could see that it lined up. Luckily, my left screw was already in a hole that worked. The right did not, so I had to make a new one. Looks like they've replaced these ovens a couple times. There were already 2 holes in there. And then the last, again, is the kind of the the big issue, or can be a big issue, is venting. So you can either recirculate, like I said, or you can have a top exhaust or a back exhaust. So you just need to figure this out. This one actually has a fan in it, and there's different directions for each one. And the fan shows you have to actually pull it out and kind of move it around, just depending on how you're installing it. Again, my vent is to the top, so I put it in for the top venting system, but you can look at it and just work on that. And then once I got this done, again, mine had the existing vent has like a little lip, so I couldn't use their bracket, but I figured it would be enough just to kind of seal it, so that when it pushes up there, it would have a seal against that, and all the air wouldn't be coming out. It would only be going out the vent, which would be the easiest way to exit. So I just put, again, some foam sealer on there, and then I was ready to put it in with everything else ready. So again, you can see how it's not too heavy. It's just a little bit bulky, and just kind of fitting it in that area with not much play. All you have to do is, again, just get it on those little tabs, and then it acts as a hinge. And once that's supporting it, but make sure you got it on there, you got to pull the cable or the power up through that hole. And I'm just double checking, make sure it's sitting on those tabs, those hinges. And then finally put the screws in on the top, because they'll carry the weight once you get in a little bit. I wouldn't just give them all of the weight, but just enough. And so this is pretty much it. Once they were in there enough, I knew it was supporting it. I just finished tightening it by hand, just because I didn't want to crack any of that wood. And it doesn't have to be really tight, but tight enough where it's holding it firm against there. And then the last, depending on your model, they usually have these filters in there. Make sure you put those in there. Those they're like rough filters, but you can see they're not great for oil and things like that. They seem to catch a little bit, but maybe you have to clean them up a little bit. But I just wanted to check the light's working, the vent's working. Mine actually had this the little cog, I guess, that goes in there that turns the plate. That needed to be installed, and those little, what the plate sits on, the little runner, what you call it, with the little pulleys on there. So once I got that in there, I was like, let me just try it out. I plugged it in, and then I want to just heat up some water just to make sure it actually worked. It should be. I tested it already, but obviously before you finalize everything and be done, just test it out a little bit. Don't burn yourself, obviously. Don't put it in there for 2 minutes and stick your finger in there. I'm just doing 30 seconds. I'm sure you know how to heat up a microwave, but it heated it up. Wasn't too hot, so yep, give myself a little thumbs up here. And the last thing is just to test the vent. You can hear it, the blower going, just testing, make sure it's working correctly. And then final was to test it. I just want to make sure it was actually blowing outside and everything was working. So I turned it on, quick run outside, didn't really need to be quick, and then I could see the actual vent blowing out. So I knew it was working and it was all functional. So this is a pretty easy fix.